Hola, welcome to another episode of the Chicana Therapist podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Xochilt Alamillo, and today we're going to talk about high functioning anxiety in Latinas. I struggle with that label, but I think we all know one or are one or admire one. Latinas that seem like perfecta por fuera, like they just seem to have their shit together. They have a clean house. Her kids are fed and look great. And she shows up to work prepared. She remembers everybody's birthday. She's thoughtful about gifts. She handles the crisis. She's like the go-to, has her shit together Latina. And maybe from the outside, she looks like she just has higher capacity than everybody else. She thrives under pressure. She loves it. She loves all these things. Or maybe we just think she's built different. I can't relate. I was never that person. I can blame it on my ADHD or just I've never been that person, but I have definitely had multiple clients who would fit this description. But here's the other part, that sometimes these Latinas that look like they have it all under control and that they thrive under pressure, on the inside are struggling. It's actually something that I see a lot of. She's maybe having trouble sleeping. She has ruminating thoughts at 2 a.m. thinking about all the things she has to do and all the things that she hasn't done and all the things that she hasn't thought about or the what ifs and all these things. She doesn't delegate anything because she feels like if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it right, so I might as well do it myself. She carries everyone else's problems and worries about everyone else so much that she doesn't even know which are her feelings and which are other people's feelings, which are her problems and which are other people's problems. And she is inside so deeply exhausted that no vacation could ever fix it. And sometimes we hear this described as high functioning anxiety. And there's a good chance that most people, including that Latina, has never realized that that's what this is. So today we're going to be talking about what this high functioning anxiety might actually look like, why it might look like this, and why it shows up so much in Latinas. And maybe if you identify as this person or you love someone who does, some tips that you can put to use to maybe relieve some of that stress. And so I really hope that some of you see yourself in what we're going to be talking about today, or not that I hope you see yourself in it, but if you do live in this way, that you find it validating and hopefully helpful. Let's get started. All right. So what is anxiety, period? So when a lot of people picture anxiety, they think of someone who's like falling apart, who's just, you think of anxiety from the Disney movie, or you're thinking panic attacks, or they're frozen, or they can't function. So that's why I decided to label this high functioning anxiety, because it's one of these types of anxieties that drives you to control as much as you possibly can in an effort to make yourself feel better. And so you, like I said, control everything as best you can. Control being keeping things clean, keeping the kids looking perfect, keeping yourself looking perfect, doing your job as perfectly as possible. Because in mindset, when you are in control, you have a better chance of not experiencing those what if situations. This is also another reason why it goes a long time without being addressed. Usually when I see Latinas that live like this, it's because they're absolutely burnt out, or they experience something else that happens to bring them into therapy, like some sort of loss. So like I said, high functioning anxiety can look like high productivity, high control, high performance. So while for some of us, anxiety causes us to shut down, for these individuals, it drives them to do more. It drives them to overachieve and over prepare and over function. You handle everything because you need to. So you feel like if I handle everything, the ball will never be dropped. And the reality is that underneath all of that, the engine running is fear. It's fear of failing, fear of disappointing people, fear of el que dirán, like I mentioned a few episodes ago, fear of whatever will happen if you let go of any of those various threads that you're holding, fear of feeling any feeling that isn't complete control. So how do you know if this is you? How do you know, like, what are the inside things or the behind the scene things that you might notice? One is maybe you have trouble sleeping because your mind will not shut down. It won't quiet down. You're constantly running through everything that needs to happen, every little step, everything that could go wrong and how you can prevent that from happening. Everything that you might have forgotten. So trouble sleeping, trouble relaxing because you're constantly thinking about what other ways can I take control and make sure that bad things don't happen. Another is worrying about things that aren't yours to worry about. You're taking on other people's problems. You're worried about your friends and your parents and your kids and your husband. And while some of that is normal, they might take on some of these things that aren't theirs to take on. Or that even the person it's happening to isn't taking it as seriously as you are. And so you're constantly taking the temperature around you. You know exactly how your kids, your parents, your friends, how they're feeling, but you have no idea how you're feeling because you're too busy thinking about everybody else. Another sign is when you feel like you need complete control over everything. In fact, you're volunteering to do things because you feel like you're the only person who will do it correctly. And even if you don't volunteer and you have responsibilities, you refuse to delegate. It feels impossible because you just do not trust somebody else to do things as well as you know that you will do them. Or you feel like you can't delegate to other people because releasing that control just doesn't feel right. Like it feels unsafe for you to release any sort of control. Another sign is being ready for anything at any time. Just always scanning for what could go wrong, always prepared for worst case scenario, almost like living in a permanent state of alertness, of low grade alert. And honestly, in my clinical work, I have seen where these Latinas might even feel relief when something does go wrong and they're prepared for it because they've been preparing for this their whole lives. So they feel uncharacteristically calm when something does happen in their life. Another is if you are that person who needs to know all of the things all the time. The more information you have, it feels safer. It feels so intolerable if you don't know everything. So you're the person who is asking questions. You might get a diagnosis and you want to know everything that could be extra added to that diagnosis or anything to look out for. You hyperfixate on everything that could potentially happen. Or, and this is just something that's a top of mind that, maybe you're pregnant and you have to find out every single thing about pregnancy and what could go wrong and how to be prepared and all the things to do. I'm not saying this is wrong for you to feel prepared, but I'm giving examples of like how you can completely immerse yourself in it. Another sign is perfectionism, like it being essential that everything that you do is perfect or you feel viscerally uncomfortable. You might also be a people pleaser because you feel like keeping everyone happy reflects on you. And so you might be doing all the things to keep everybody happy because you don't want anyone upset because again, you are very conscious of everyone else's emotions. You might also be the person who will not sit down. And oftentimes this is because you feel like the minute you sit down, things are going to go to shit. Or you feel like the moment you sit down, you start getting those ruminating thoughts that you can't seem to avoid at night. So you might be hearing a lot of themes here, but one of them is this idea of control. Anxiety ultimately is about control. You feel anxiety when there are things that you cannot control. And I know that oftentimes we joke about it being like a personality type or just being type A or just being a perfectionist. And to me, my clinical brain always like kind of goes off as anxiety. Like you might have anxiety. And the thing about all of these things is that society gives us the message that none of these things are bad, right? Like we even feel like perfectionism is like oh, that's just because they care a lot about the work that they do. And it can be, I'm not saying it's not, but society rewards us for being hyper productive or constantly doing things society sees us as being driven and ambitious. And again, those can be correct, but it could also be this. So why does this show up so often in Latinas specifically? I have a few theories because high functioning anxiety doesn't just appear in a vacuum, right? It comes about for Latinas specifically because of cultural and generational conditioning. And I've talked a lot on this podcast about Marianismo and other reasons why Latinas are particularly vulnerable to developing this anxiety, particular high functioning anxiety, any kind of anxiety really. And it makes us vulnerable to not recognize it or to not seek help for it. So again, Marianismo exists, this cultural idea of the Latina being self-sacrificing, nurturing, strong, endlessly capable, and putting everyone else first. And we're often seen as the people who keep the family together. We don't complain. We're fuertes. And so when your cultural identity is built around being that person who handles everything, who takes care of everything, who knows how to solve everything, the anxiety piece becomes invisible because it just looks like you know what you're doing. And I want to add in, because this is also a thing, the eldest daughter dynamic. This idea that the eldest daughter is the glue that holds everyone together. She's the one que cuida todos, the one who potentially entered into a parental role fairly early by helping take care of her siblings or maybe little cousins, who possibly translated for her parents and had to learn a lot of things really fast, really young, learn to manage the household, and most importantly, possibly learn that her worth was tied to how useful she was. So when this is all put upon you, you don't really get anxious, you just become capable. That's the idea, right? Except that the anxiety is always there underneath. It just became a productive type of anxious. And on top of that, there's the first generation pressure, the weight of being the first one who, enter here, the first one who went to college, the first one who got a corporate job, the first one who made it, whatever that means, the one who carries the sacrifice of your parents and anyone who came before you. And so there's this message in between all of that that's implicit of like, you cannot fail, you can't slow down, you have expectations of you. And the message is that you are here because you worked harder than everyone else. And that's the only way that you can stay here, is if you continue to work harder than everybody else. So daughters of immigrants carry this specifically, the parents who sacrificed everything, who crossed the border so you could have better opportunities. How are you supposed to rest when you know that it cost them everything? This idea causes a lot of anxiety. How do you stop performing excellence when anything other than that feels like a betrayal or like a disappointment to that sacrifice? So after all of that, I just want to pause and ask, do you see yourself in any of these things that I've talked about today? Are you that person who someone asks you how you're doing and you just, good, no problem, nothing's wrong, you never give a real answer? Or are you maybe that person who you can't sit still and it's not due to a medical condition? And when was the last time that you just let something be someone else's problem and actually left it and didn't do anything because it wasn't your problem? And if anything I just said makes you feel super uncomfortable, or if the idea of not being in control or not being useful or of not being the one who handles everything feels like genuinely threatening, I want you to consider that what you're experiencing isn't just eldest daughter or daughter of immigrant syndrome or your personality, that it might actually be anxiety. Like I said, women that I see with this type of anxiety often come to therapy not because they're like, I have anxiety, but because they're burnt out, they're exhausted, or a relationship is falling apart, or their bodies start giving out. They start having headaches, stomach issues, they can't sleep, they're chronically tense or tired. So when your mind gets really good at managing something like anxiety, the body sometimes starts to show it. So that can be pretty powerful for people, just recognizing that this way of being is not just who you are, but it's a response to pressure, to expectations, maybe even this cultural script that exists for Latinas that didn't allow you to be anything less than that fuerte, that strong woman. And so, of course, that response makes sense. But it also has, I was recently asked by, I was on a podcast, Yo Quiero Dinero with Janice Torres, and she asked me, when does being the strong one stop being a flex? And my response to that is that it stops being a flex when it comes at the cost of your own well-being. And so I want you to think about that. It might feel good for you to handle everything and do everything and you're on your own and you get shit done. It might feel really good for a while, but eventually it's going to catch up to you. All right, so maybe I've called a few of you out. Now what? Now what do we do? Well, the first thing I recommend is to give yourself permission to slow down. You are allowed to put things down. You're allowed to not know everything. You're allowed to let something be imperfect. I know some of you are cringing right now. You're allowed to let someone else handle things. You're allowed to rest without having earned it, whatever that means, by exhausting yourself. I'm giving you explicit permission right now because I know some of you need to hear it, but that's the first thing, is that you need to accept that you have permission to do less than you've been taught to do and have strived to do for so many years. The second is starting to try to notice that anxiety that lives under all that need for control. Some would maybe call it mindfulness, self-awareness. So when you feel that urge to take something over, or to volunteer, or when you feel that urge to over-prepare, or you're lying awake thinking of everything that could go wrong, I encourage you to get curious. Instead of just immediately complying with that urge to do those things, start to get curious. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of that will happen if I don't do this? Or like, what does this control give me? Or what am I protecting myself from? It can take a while. It can take a while for you to really dig deep under there. This is some of the work that I do in therapy. So if you're struggling with that part and you have access to therapy, that's a good place to explore this. But you can try it on your own as well. Third is kind of like exposure therapy. Practice tolerating uncertainty in small doses. So anxiety is just fed by avoidance, right? Every time you seek information to calm the anxiety or you take control to manage that fear, you teach your nervous system that the threat was real and so you needed to act. So the antidote to that is to slowly and gently teach your nervous system that you can tolerate not knowing. That uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it's survivable. Fourth, get support. And I believe this as a therapist, that therapy can help, but also just as a human being, I think that that's a lot to carry on your own. And it can be hard to just think your way out of this alone. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be like, I'm not going to be like that anymore. So talk to someone. If you don't have access to therapy, talk to a trusted friend or someone in the community. You deserve somewhere to put it down because you've been holding it for so long. And fifth, challenge that narrative, that story that your worth is tied to your productivity or your output. You are not valuable because of what you produce. You aren't. I know that it feels that way, but you aren't. You're not only loved because you never drop the ball. You're not loved because you seem to be perfect. Because the people who matter in your life, the people who really love you, they don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present. They need you to be well. And you cannot be present if you're just running on anxiety. Like I said, it might feel good to produce and to be in control, but at the end of the day, it's going to catch up to you. And I also want to point out that your behavior, this need for control, also affects people around you. If you're that person who's constantly double checking everything, and are you sure you did this? Are you sure you did that? To the people around you, that can also be, annoying, yes, but also send this message of, I don't trust you. Especially when it's like your own kids. You're teaching them that they're not to be trusted, that they need you for everything. And so I also want to put it out there that sometimes folks that experience high functioning anxiety don't realize the impact it has on the ones around them. I don't know about y'all, but I am not this person, right? I am not the perfectionist. That's not me. And so I used to be in group assignments in grad school with perfectionists, and it was the worst. It was the worst because I could see that when something was good and done and they just kept picking at it and wanted me to pick at it with them. And I see this a lot in families. Let's realize that sometimes our own maladaptive practices affect the people around us. And if we care about them, it's also another reason why we should kind of look into it. So if you heard yourself in this episode, if you recognized a lot of the things that I was talking about or the women I described, I want you to know that you are not broken. You are not a person who needs to be fixed. You're a person who learned to adapt and cope in a way that worked for you at the time until it didn't or until it won't. And recognizing that is the first step towards doing something different. So yes, you might like being perfecta por fuera, but you deserve to feel okay on the inside too. You don't have to be miserable. And that doesn't mean that you're weak. It's just reality. So if you are ready to explore this further, I encourage you to seek therapy. That's a great place to start. But again, if you don't have access to that, try talking to someone else about it, your partner, your loved one, your best friend. And remember that as of the time of this recording, we only have 2 spots left for our Oaxaca retreat for Latinas in September of this year. And we would love for you to join us if you're interested in exploring some of these themes that we talked about today and reconnecting with the real you. I also offer coaching for providers or clinicians who are interested in programming around topics like this for your own community, creating offerings outside of one-on-one therapy. So please check out my website, thechicanatherapist.com, for either of these things. Remember, I'm on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and I also have a blog. If you want to be updated on episodes, please go to my website, thechicanatherapist.com, and sign up for the newsletter. As always, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for being here. Cuídense mucho. I'll see you the next episode. Thank you for listening. This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing shared in this podcast constitutes therapy, clinical advice, or a therapeutic relationship. Listening to this podcast does not establish a provider-client relationship, and if you're experiencing a mental health crisis or in need of clinical support, please contact a licensed mental health professional or call or text 988 Crisis Hotline.